At this point, we've collected all of the data that we want to work on in an Azure SQL database on the cloud. In this demo, we'll see how we can use Azure Data Studio to query data and represent insights. Azure Data Studio is a free cross-platform tool that Microsoft offers to connect and work with SQL databases which are present on-premise or on the cloud. Unlike SQL Server Management Studio, which works only on Windows machines, Azure Data Studio can work on Mac as well as Linux machines. I'm currently on a Windows. In order to click on this Azure on Wi-Fi, choose password with the deacon DB and test mobile. This makes it very easy. Run is more than just a simple query that a temp test bar. In this clip, we'll continue working with Azure Data Studio. I'm going to run an alter database query to turn on Query Store. Query Store on the Azure SQL database captures a history of queries, plans, and other runtime statistics to help this search box.net that we have DB of all of the queries and additional details. The time, right click and choose the Manage option. And this will bring up the monitoring dashboard for this particular database. And you'll find here the widgets that you configured. Here is our slow queries widget, which tracks the time taken for every query that you executed on your database. Top one with ID 1 that is available here indicates how much space is occupied by each of our tables. Let's see a chart of an equal number of mobiles in each price range. Run down to select another chart type. I'm going to go with a table representation of this data visualization. I'm going to now a dashboard. In the set file that you hit connect your database. In this demo, we'll use the Power BI tool that might be possible that you work with Power BI. It's a widely used business analytics and visualization tool which can integrate with your cloud database. Here in this demo, I'm going to download Power BI for my Windows desktop and use Power BI to connect to Azure SQL database on the Azure cloud. Click on the download button here on this page, Power BI machine, local machine. Here are all of the data sources that you can use with Power BI. Can be integrated. Dialog that pops up. So choose use database query. Select available and input values by default. Move it up mobile segregation, pipes range and here you can configure custom colors for each section of your to be a. In this clip, we'll explore some more visualization. Camera megapixel entry camera to our station. Mobiles in my dataset present the RAM value. Select the field and choose don't sound expensive mobiles in price range category 3 and obtain using visualizations on the Azure Data Studio as well as Power BI. Data comes in many forms. But for analysis, in this module, visually to use some other courses and Mike's univariate, bivariate, and multivariate analysis of data capabilities will discuss univariate, bivariate rule is analysis. Here we'll talk about the basic principles involved in designing a machine learning experiment and work with the Azure ML Studio. That's it from me here today. I hope you had fun with this course. Thank you for listening. Hi, my name is Janani Ravi and welcome to this course on combining and shaping data. A little about myself. I have a master's degree in electrical engineering, most sought after skill these days for everyone ranging from business professionals to data scientists. In this course, you will gain the ability to connect the dots by pulling together data from disparate sources and shaping it so that extracting connections and
Hello, I'm Stacia Varga. Welcome to the Building Your First Power BI Report course. My job involves working with data all the time. As a consultant, helping my clients use and understand their data, and as an instructor and author, teaching people how to build data solutions and work with data effectively. One of the best ways to explore your data is to use Power BI, and it's fun too. This tool includes so many features that it might seem a bit overwhelming at first, but the great part about Power BI is that it's easy for anyone to get started, regardless of your skill level with data and reporting. And then, as you get more familiar with its capabilities, you can explore the more advanced features and grow your reporting skills too. In this course, I'm going to assume that you've never used Power BI before and need an easy introduction to learn your way around the tool and see what its capabilities are. Specifically, we're going to import data from an Excel workbook and then make some structural changes to the data to improve it for reporting. And then we'll work on the data model, which controls how the data behaves in reports. And then we'll get down to the business of creating a report by placing visualizations and supporting static elements on a page so that we can look at our data from different perspectives. By the end of this course, you'll know how to get data into Power BI and how to use its most important reporting features so that you can build reports using your own data. And you can do this without needing to know anything other than how to install Power BI and how to find files on your computer. You do not need to know how to program or how to write a data query. From here, you can continue learning more about Power BI by viewing other Pluralsight courses on Power Query, modeling data in Power BI, DAX, and several other courses covering different aspects of using Power BI. Now, let's get you started on this journey with the Building Your First Power BI Report course here at Pluralsight. Hi, I'm Stacia Varga, and welcome to the course Building Your First Power BI Report. My assumption in this course is that Power BI is new to you, but you want to get familiar with it quickly. With that assumption in mind, my goal is to give you just enough information and show just enough features so that you can see what Power BI is capable of. But I'll keep the concepts and demonstrations at a relatively high level. There are several other courses available here at Pluralsight that will cover Power BI in greater detail, and I encourage you to view them after you complete this course. In this module, I'm going to introduce the Power BI query editor that's available in the Power BI desktop application that you download for free from Microsoft. No matter how simple or complex your data is, you'll always use the Power BI query editor to import the data into Power BI. Now, there are many different types of data sources that you can import into Power BI. In some cases, the import step may be all that you need to do to get data for your reporting, but it's not uncommon that you have to do some additional work to get the data ready. The official phrase that we use in the data management field to describe that additional work is transforming data. The Power BI query editor includes a lot of features that you can use for transformations. Again, in this module, we'll review only a few of the possibilities, but we'll definitely cover the more common transformations, and you'll see how to know what other options exist. A subset of the data transformation task in the Power BI query editor is used for cleansing data. This group of tasks is used to fix data quality problems such as bad characters in the data, as just one example. By the time you finish this module, you'll have a good understanding of the steps you need to take to get your data into Power BI and to shape it up in preparation for building a report. There are so many different types of data available, and Power BI makes it easy to access that data, whether it's on your computer, on a database server, or in the cloud. The types of data sources that Power BI supports automatically is pretty extensive, and it's growing all the time. So whenever you update the Power BI desktop application, you should take a look at the data sources to see if there's anything new that you might like to use in Power BI. In this module, we're going to work with data about movies. I have an Excel file that contains some general information about the movies themselves, which I downloaded from IMDb, and then I filtered the dataset down to just movies released between 2014 and 2018 so that we have enough data to do some data transformations and reporting, but we'll keep the size of the data small enough so that we can do our work quickly. The Excel file has data about movies that have either won or been nominated for an Academy Award. Power BI has a special way to store the data that you import, which compresses the data to a smaller size and optimizes the structure of the data for fast reporting. The Power BI desktop application holds the data in memory, which is another reason why reports can respond fast to changes, and when you close the application, the data stays in its compressed and optimized format. As a PBIX file. And remember, there's so many more data sources that are supported, but regardless of what you need to use for your projects, you'll see that it's pretty easy to get your data into Power BI if you know where it is and have the right security permissions to access it. Here I have the Power BI desktop application installed and running on my computer. You can download this application for free from Microsoft using the link that I have specified in the exercise files that accompany this course. It's important to understand that Power BI is constantly changing. So depending upon which version you have downloaded and whether you have updated it or not, you might see some differences. So just by way of explanation, let me show you under the Help tab on the ribbon, there is an About button, and you can see here that I am working with the March 2019 version of the Power BI. BI desktop application. So if you see things that are different on your screen from what you see on my screen, it's very likely to be a difference in the version. Now we're looking at the first screen available in the Power BI desktop application, which happens to be the report designer. Now this course is about building your first report, but we can't build the report yet until we have some data. So let's go import some data. On the Home tab of the ribbon, we have the Get Data button. Actually, it's a button that we need to click to show more buttons. And Microsoft has listed the most common data sources on the first menu that displays here. We can get a complete list of the data sources supported for the current version of the Power BI desktop application by clicking More. And here you can get a complete list of all the possible sources. And you can filter this list to specific types, such as databases. So every time you get a new update to the application, you might want to peruse this list to see what's available. From time to time, you'll see some data sources listed with beta in parentheses after the data source name, and that lets you know that that particular data connection is still a work in progress and could potentially change in some future version of the desktop application. For our purposes, we're going to import a file type coming from Excel. So I'll select Excel in the list here, and then I have extracted the exercise files for this course to my C drive, and this data is found in the Power BI Building First Report Data folder. Power BI opens the file, and then it says there are two objects contained in here. One is a sheet and one is a table that exists on this sheet. So we can see here are some column headers with data, and we can scroll to the right to see all of the columns. So we can preview either of these options, and they look pretty much the same in this particular case. Maybe we have a sheet that contains multiple tables, so you could, in that case, simply select the table that you want to use. So when I select the checkbox next to the element of the worksheet that I want to import into Power BI, I then have two buttons available, presuming that I don't want to cancel this operation. I have the Load button, which copies the data into Power BI and assumes that I do not need to make any changes to it. There's also the Edit button, which allows me to make some changes if necessary to that data before I start using it with reporting. Let's go ahead and choose the load option. We can see Power BI creates a connection, loads the data. It shows us how many rows of data were loaded, and it adds a table, and we can see each column represented in that table becomes a field over here to the right of my report designer. Sometimes after you load data into Power BI, the data is not quite ready in its current state for reporting. Fortunately, you have lots of options for transforming that data. There are some transformations that you may use only occasionally, and there are some that you will probably use all the time. A very common task is to eliminate columns. Because Power BI requires memory to hold all your data, you should consider whether you really need all the data that you imported. When you first start working with a particular data source, you might not know if you need it or not, but that's okay. You can always eliminate one or more columns from a query at any time. And if you delete a column and decide you need it later, it's really easy to add it back again. Another common task is to filter rows, which you would do for the same reason as eliminating columns. That is, you filter rows when you don't need all the data. Power BI supports both simple and complex filters. A simple filter has just one rule defining what to keep or remove, whereas a complex filter has multiple rules using AND or OR logic for a more specific definition of what to keep or remove. A third common task is to fix up metadata. That might be as simple as renaming a query or renaming a column, or you might fix a data type. Although it's possible to make these changes elsewhere in Power BI, such as in the data model itself, which you'll learn about later, it's a good idea to do as much as you can in the query editor because you can save these rules to the Power BI service as an object called a dataset, and then you can reuse that final version of the dataset without having to start over from the beginning and repeat these transformation steps each time that you want to create a new PBIX file using the same data. To access the Power BI query editor from the report designer so that you can apply transformations to the data, click the Edit Queries button and then click the Edit Queries command below the button. And when the query editor is open, we're ready to start performing some transformations. Now, there's no particular order in which you need to do this. Sometimes it's just trial and error. You make a change, see what happens, try something else, fine-tune it, and then maybe discover you did something you didn't mean to do. Then you can undo it. We're going to take a bit more methodical approach than we might in real life here by starting with simply eliminating columns that we don't need from our query. So I'll just start with the query named table 3 right now, and title type. When I look at it, I can see everything contains the same value, movie, and if I click the drop-down list here, I can see what else might be in there. Now, Power BI does tell me that the list may be incomplete. I can click Load More for it to analyze the complete set. But as it turns out, there really is only one value, movie, in there, and that's not particularly useful to me. So that is a column that I can delete. So when I select a column, notice that the color of the column header changes to show what is currently selected. So I can toggle between tconst and title type. When I right-click a selected column, a context menu displays, and I can choose to remove the selected column. Now there is an option to reverse that process. Maybe I have more columns to delete than to keep. I can select a column and choose the option to remove all the other columns, that is, the unselected columns. But in this case, I really am just going to select the remove option. So as I continue to review the remaining columns, I'll keep this one that contains the title of the movie, but I do not need original title, so we'll just repeat the process. Select the column, right-click it, and select the remove command. End year doesn't seem to have any data in it, so we will remove that column as well. Now, one thing you should be aware of is that if you make a mistake and accidentally delete something that you did not intend to delete, it's easy to fix. Over on the right-hand side, below the properties for the selected query, there's a list of applied steps. And if you select on each step, you can see what the data looks like at that point in time. In other words, when that step is applied. So we start with the source, and notice the little gear icon here allows me to see what that source is. When I click on it, it displays a dialog box, and then the next step selected one of the elements off of that page, which happened to be a table. Next, it changed some data types, and this is a little bit harder to see, so I'm going to back up and look at the column. Notice, next to each column header, there's an icon. Let's go to change type, and you see that it's changed. That's a data type change that Power BI automatically applied, and we'll learn more about that a little bit later. So if I made a mistake here, I can simply click this X to the left of removed columns, and the columns reappear. There is no redo here. I simply have to repeat the step that eliminated those columns in the first place. So I can put back that removed column steps. And there you have our first set of transformations. Our next transformation is filtering rows. And we don't have a lot of that to do in here. But just as a reminder, in this first table, we only have films from 2014 to 2018. One type of filtering that we can do is explicit filtering, where we actually clear all the checkboxes and then find the values that we want. That's one way to do this, and that's valid. But hypothetically, imagine if you were working with data coming from a database that's getting refreshed periodically. If you make an explicit selection like 2014 to 2018, then as you get 2019 and 2020 data, that would never appear. So an alternative option would be to go ahead and select all here and point to the number filters so that we see the context menu that applies to number filters. And you can see, because this is a number column, we have operators like equals, does not equal, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, or between. So if we wanted to have a dynamic range that includes years as they get added to this list, we can select the greater than or equal to. and put in 2014. Notice while we're here that we have the opportunity to add in a second filter criteria and use either and or logic with that. And if that's not enough, we can continue to add multiple criteria, and then between those we can select and or logic. But in this case, year greater than or equal to 2014 is just fine. And notice at the year greater than or equal to to 2014 is just fine. And notice at the top of the column, there's a filter icon to let us know that we have applied a filter. And in the applied steps, you can see the filtered rows step. And if you click the gear icon, you have access to the dialog box where you configure the filter. So if you need to change it, you have the opportunity to do so. Sometimes these names of things aren't particularly helpful for me to build a report. So one of the first things I like to do after I create a query is to rename the things that I need to rename, whether that's at the query level or at the column level. So let's start with our first item here, table 3. We'll call this movies. But in this case, it doesn't seem to have at that point in. And look at X to the left of removed columns. Move and filter icon and step. If you sometimes, so one of the first things I need to rename or at the column 3, we'll call. And for columns, I'm going to rename tconst. Here, if I right click and select rename, I can put in the movie ID. We'll call the primary title, start year, I'm going to rename as release year. And runtime minutes, I will rename as duration. And I will rename genre with a capital G. So I like to have some standards where I have meaningful names. Capitalization. But that's just a matter of personal preference. So I'll do one last review of data types, scanning through the columns to make sure that everything is set as a text or a numeric value. as needed. Collectively, eliminating columns, filtering rows, and fixing metadata are the most common types of transformations that you're likely to encounter. There are so many different options that we have for transforming data in the Power BI query editor. We can't go through all of them in this module, but there are a few more transformations that we need to make to the demonstration data so that it's ready for reporting. I wouldn't consider this group the most common types of transformations, but I do use them quite often, and you might probably need to do so as well. So let's take a look. First, we have the option to duplicate a query. It works like it sounds. You literally make a copy of an existing query, including all of the transformation steps from the import to whatever steps were applied to the query after that point. And now you have doubled the data associated with the query at this point. You can then make changes to each of those two queries separately and refine the results to whatever you need. So by the time you finish, you might not have doubled the data after all. Another type of transformation is the split by delimiter. And you use this option when you have a column with data that you want to separate into multiple columns. For example, if you had the full name of a person in a single column, you might want to split the full name by the space between the first name and the last name, and then you'd wind up with two columns. The number of columns that you end up with after the transformation depends on what you configure the transformation to split on. Yet another type of transformation is unpivot. Essentially, what this does is to take data that is spread out across multiple columns and convert that data into new rows. Each column included in the unpivot becomes two columns in the resulting query after the fact. One column holds the header text from the original column, and the second column holds whatever was in the row for that column. But this will be easier to understand when you see the unpivot demonstration. Let's continue our transformation work by cleaning up the movies query a bit more. Currently,